Howdy ho there, sword friends. This is going to be a review of a Skyjiro Kumo Cloud Katana. And in fact, this is going to be very rambly as all my videos are, but in a nutshell, yet again, this is another Skyjiro blade that is owned by a friend of mine. I have sold it on his behalf and it needs to go to the next owner, but I thought I better get my ass in gear and make a video about it because it is a rare chance to check out a really nice sword from Skyjiro. It's not very often that I have the opportunity to get swords like this. And it might not be very often that you have the opportunity to see them either. So I am going to make an attempt at doing some quick thoughts and whatnot on this review. I'll do some handling and whatnot, not necessarily a ton of it. Certainly won't be cutting with it. The sword has already sold and I need to get it off to the next owner. So anything that I do is really going to be very minor that won't affect the condition in any way of said sword. But these are just going to be my general thoughts, and as always, keep in mind the general caveats that I say. I'm not an expert. These are my general thoughts. Skyjiro isn't asking me to do any of this. It's just an opportunity to share some cool sword stuff with you. And in addition, this is a technically secondhand piece. It hasn't been used. I think it's pretty representative of what Skyjiro would sell you, but it did come from a friend of mine. It is secondhand, so it might not be entirely representative of what you would buy from Skyjiro directly. Okay, now I'm going to move on with some stuff. The next bit that I actually want to share is a little bit of screenshotting with the computer. Now, what I have here is this is my eBay auction, or the listing that I put up on eBay. And in addition to that, I have the web page pulled up for the Skyjiro Kumo, or the Cloud Katana. And what you can see here, this is their sensei grade, which is supposed to be one of the, the higher end pieces. It retails for $1,700, which is pretty up there, no doubt. This one has no real notable condition issues, but it's not perfect, so it sold for a bit less than that. So, nevertheless, there's some things to note about the blade itself. So first of all, one of the things that's supposed to be special about this one, and what makes it $1,700, at least subjectively or potentially, is that this is supposed to be a laminated blade. Now, if you're not familiar with laminated blades, let's see. I can try and explain, but the inner core of the blade is a different steel. So you have folding a blade, which is taking a piece of steel and folding it over itself, and you then have a folded piece of steel. I'm not going to get into the whys and whats and reasons of that, but in effect, folding a steel and laminating are different things. So you have a folded steel over here, and that is your hardened steel, and you folded it over itself, and now you have this kind of plank, and now you have a softer steel or iron or something like that, and you're going to use that, and you're going to forge weld them together to make a sword. Probably not in this exact combination, because that would probably be stupid, but if you have the softer core and then the harder edge forged together, then you get a benefit of potentially a steel that's better at edge retention along the edge, and a steel that's more shock resistant, more able to take bending and twisting and not break in half, or a less brittle steel along the back, and that gives you two steels that are working in unison to give you a sword that is perhaps better than the sum of its parts. So that is in a nutshell why you would potentially want something. It's a type of traditional method that was used. In this one, it says it uses a particular type of steel. It has a whole bunch of layers, but this kobusei construction is kind of the linchpin here of why it likely costs a lot more money. It takes a lot of time to make this type of sword construction. The trick is that there's really no way for me to validate if that is the case without breaking it in half. Some people have said you can look at the steel and tell if it's laminated or done that way. I personally don't have the ability to do that, and I question a lot of the folks that do. Perhaps there are some swordsmiths and people that work in that arena that have the aptitude to do it, but I've seen too many blades where people have said it's folded and it's been banding in the steel, or that have said it's laminated and it looked laminated but it turned out not to be laminated. So there's a lot of different ways that steel can react. I'm certainly no expert in that arena, and I can't tell. The only way for me to really tell would be to cut it in half and then to put the blade in some sort of etchant, and then to look at the results and see if the outer edge or some portion of the blade reacted differently to a acid etch than a different part of the blade, and that would tell me if it's laminated or give me some idea of the inner construction. Unfortunately, that would destroy the blade in the process. So it's a bit of blind faith, and there has been some in the sword community, not with Skyjiro in general, but there has been some doubt as to if many of these blades that are likely manufactured in China that say they are laminated are in fact laminated. Now, Skyjiro has been pretty forthright in their communication. I don't have any reason to suspect that it's not, but it is a point to note that you have to take it a bit in trust that the sword you have is constructed in this way. And if you're paying a lot of money and that thing is valuable to you, it's something that I don't necessarily have the best way as a reviewer, online random sword guy, to tell you how to verify or substantiate. I've harped on that enough, but supposedly this one is done with this kobusei construction, and I'm guessing that's why it has a bigger price tag. That takes a lot more time and energy to produce, and so it costs more money. In addition, there are some other measurements down here that I would draw your attention to, and that's because I have the measurements taken from the blade here. Note that the MSRP is higher. Cult of Athena had it for a little bit less at the time I made the eBay ad. The point that I really want to draw to, though, is here we have 2 pounds 4 ounces without the saya. My measurement for this blade without the saya was 2 pounds 7 ounces. So I have a blade that's a little bit heavier. The blade length 28.5 without the habaki. If we can find this here, where is the blade length? Swords. Why am I can't see things. Here we go. So 28.4 inches, and it looks like they have some other variations available as well. So the blade may vary in length. Perhaps you have a 30-inch iteration. The handle, my handle over here measured at 11.25. So they have 11-inch, 11.5. I have somewhere in between there, which doesn't look like an option. Nevertheless, there are a few different options. So you might find that this sword is available, or I guess the main important thing would be to, if you're picking one up secondhand or you're buying one from a vendor, just be sure you know which one you're getting. If you are sensitive to, if you're buying the sword because it fits you and you have some length requirements, be sure you're getting the one that you're actually after. Back to this bit here, we have Sori, and let's see if I can find the Sori. Sometimes they are not actually on here or demonstrated, but anyway, you can probably pause and compare and contrast the options. I also have them in inches here. It looks like the Motokasane, Sakikasane, all of that are in millimeters. Now this is something that I don't think is quite right. I think they added an extra 0 here, I'm guessing, because the Moto-haba 322 millimeters would be 32 centimeters, and yeah, that seems pretty big. Nevertheless, the point I'm going to drive at is that there are some differences, which points to the fact that they're handmade. They're not made on a CNC machine. Even if they were, when they grind them, there can be some subtle differences between blades, and they vary, and those variances can affect how they feel and handle. On top of that, you have different models with different lengths. But it looks like this one is supposed to be the 28.5-inch version, and the blade has some subtle variation to what's advertised based on the measurements that you can see. I took from the blade I individually have. Okay, the other bit that you can see here is that the MSRP is $1,747, and the Cult of Athena sells it for around $1,500. And so I have to, as I give my thoughts, keep in mind that this is a $1,500 sword, which puts it not at the highest end of reproduction swords or production swords made in China and whatnot, but it is definitely among the higher end. So if this is a sword from Sino's sword or Jiko's sword, and it wouldn't be fair to compare and contrast these to one another. This is a $200-something sword. This is almost $2,000 or $1,500. So you would expect that there would be quite a substantial difference between the two. And I just have to keep in mind, so if you hear me nitpicking about things, a lot of it has to do with the price point and reference. I think a lot of people expect perfection for $200. You don't get that at all. You don't get perfection for $200,000, but nevertheless, at $1,500, a lot of the little nitpicky details should be addressed, and it should be a quality piece in terms of the mount and whatnot. So let's see if it lives up to that. Aesthetically, aesthetics are a subjective thing, and I'm not going to harp on it too much, but to me, my eye, when I get close to the blade, is drawn to this ska area. The black, this brighter area in the silver kind of pulls my eye in, and I'm lost on the saya bit here. But aesthetics are a subjective thing. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I think the fittings and overall, the look has some class to it, if I'm just, talking about what I personally think. The gloss black saya, I think, needs a little bit of something else to offset this kind of bling over here. But I do like the textures and the patterns and how this overall section looks. It just kind of clashes with the black. Now, at a distance, it just kind of looks like a dark, a very classic looking gloss black katana without a lot of frills. And it's not until you kind of get closer that you can see that this is a lot brighter and it pulls your eye in. Anyway, that's a subjective thing. I do like how it looks, but it seems a little off kilter in terms of the balance of it. I like to have my eye not inherently drawn to any one thing, and it is in this case. But again, that's my personal preference. In terms of how it's all assembled, let's take a look. So the kashira is on there real tight. It might be glued, I'm not sure, but it doesn't have any wiggle at all. The patina on this thing, these are obviously cast fittings like any other, but they have a nice kind of silver bit to them. And a lot of times when you have different patterns, like you have black and then they put silver on, it can get gaudy and ugly. And this has a sense of refinement and class to it that I think is pretty good. I like the fitting overall. I like the texture. It's got little shitadome. I can't remember if that's how you say it. You'd think by now I would know what the vernacular is. I think these are actually just part of the kashira, though. They're not separate pieces, which they typically would be, but I believe this is just part of the cast fitting. But they have a nice look, and they almost look like separate pieces, but they're not, so I suppose that's a sign of a well-cast fitting. If I move on to the ito is tight. It's not as tight as some other Skyjiro blades that I've had. This is, for Skyjiro, one of their looser wraps, but it's still tight on the grand scale. Nothing about this wrap would make me feel that it is not serviceable or not good. The diamonds seem reasonably even. There's a little bit of difference in them. They're not perfectly straight. It's a little worse on this side than the other, but the ito overall is very good, very serviceable. It's very comfortable. I like the shape of the handle overall. It fits well in my big sausage hands, but it seems like it wouldn't be too cumbersome to hold on to for somebody with smaller hands or even larger hands than me. We have two makugi. Underneath here there is a panel of white samegawa. Now I can make out the panel based on this little ledge that I'm feeling right here. And at $1,700, I personally, I guess I would like to see a full wrap of samegawa. I know that most people don't do full wraps, even at really high-end price points, and it's not uncharacteristic to find potentially nice Japanese swords with panels underneath. The samegawa at a full wrap, I mean, this is supposed to be kind of an instructor grade sword and intended for use. A full wrap of samegawa increases the structural integrity of the handle, and to have panels means that the wood, there's two pieces of wood that are kind of stuck together around the nakago or the tang, and then it's bound in this silk and has two pegs in it. But if it had that additional wrap of samegawa, I think that would be beneficial, because otherwise there's just a bit of wood and silk. The extra samegawa would add some integrity to that and help an instructor if they're whacking it into stuff. Nevertheless, it's got some panels on it. I can see that the quality of the samegawa does not really appear to be fantastic. It's not bad. I mean, when I say the quality, I don't see any holes or any problems in the samegawa itself, but all the nodules are on the smaller side. And so oftentimes you would hope to see like an emperor node or some very large nodule samegawa for a higher priced sword. In this case, I don't see that. The panels are of decent quality. They're not pocked with holes. They're not stained. They don't have crap in them or in between the nodules. But they're also not very large nodules either, and that's what I mean. The larger the nodules in the samegawa skin, typically the more expensive or the nicer the skin. Not always, but in general, that's one way to look at it. The Manuki have, I'm not sure exactly what the symbol is. They're pretty solid in there. They seem nice, and I like how they accent things. The The planes on this are a little bit off though. There's a very small ledge here, which you might not be able to see, but as I move my hand over it, it doesn't get caught, so this would be a problem. Again, I think of this as an instructor piece. You're going to have your hand down here, and if there's a ledge here, your finger tends to get caught on it and it can be uncomfortable. This seems to be rounded enough. Up here, it's again not perfectly aligned, but overall quite good. This is a nice bit here. The fuchi and tsuba are all very tight. I like the pattern and how they blend in. There's like a cast bit of Nanako on here and on the tsuba, and they all have a silver rim. Thematically, I think they blend very well. It's simple. It's not overdone, and it's tough to do that. When you start having black and silver, and sometimes they mix gold in, like I said, it's real easy to start looking trashy, but this has kind of a refined look, in my opinion. I do like how it looks. There's some imperfections in the casting. Some of the fittings are not perfect. There's a little bit of spot here where some of the silver on the rim went in one of the crevices. So they're not perfect, but overall the casting quality is good, and I would say that this is different. I haven't seen this layout, the tsuba pattern exactly on a lot of other swords outside of Skyjiro, so it's nice that they kind of have their own thing going. The Sugeo appears rather nice. The lacquer on the saya looks just kind of big. Now the transitions on here are not bad. If I look between these 2 points, you can see that they line up pretty well, and it's not that one is egregiously larger than the other, so I would say that this is pretty good. The saya does seem to be a little bit more stout than some of the other sayas I've seen from Skyjiro. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, if this is going to be used a lot, having something that's a little more sizable and robust will help it hold up a little bit longer, but it also kind of loses a little bit of the refinement. Nevertheless, the lacquer looks nice. There's a horn, koiguchi, kurikata. Those are the end pieces. The koiguchi is this mouth, kurikata is this little cap here that holds the Sugeo, and the kojiri is this end piece here. They have some nice shaping. You can tell that they're horn. They fit in pretty well, and there's no giant, issues or anything like that. They line up and transition pretty well. All right, so that's in a nutshell the blade part. Now the fitting part. I'm going to talk about the blade now. All right, now let's talk about the blade. So if I'm looking at the blade part, here I have the habaki. What I like about Skyjiro is that the habaki is just different. It has a crossed feather pattern on here. I can't remember exactly what that sign is indicative of, but it's Skyjiro's logo nonetheless, and the habaki just looks different. A lot of times you have these, if I use this as an example, this kind of very plain Jane brass habaki. And that's not to say that those are bad, but it seems like just about every sword uses that same type of habaki, so the fact that Skyjiro's look different is a nice touch. I also like that they've put some silver elements on here, or some sort of silver coating, and that makes it look like the rest of the sword. It's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when we have a lot of silver on a handle and then a brass habaki, or a lot of copper colored and then brass. I mean, brass goes well with a gold color, but it doesn't necessarily look terribly good with copper or silver colors. To me, it throws me off. It's not to say that that would be unhistoric or bad or unfunctional, but aesthetically, I think thematically this blends very well together. The rest of the sword, well, frankly, she sure is pretty. That's pretty much the thing I can say. What I notice in the blade itself is it's nice. I can make out a very discernible folding pattern in the steel, and that's something that's a little tough for me to capture on camera, but it does come out. The weather's not terribly cooperative for me to show you some of these effects. What, again, I don't see in the blade is some indication of lamination, and I don't know that I would, but it's just not something that I am personally spotting. Additionally, the Kasaki is, for a sword of this price, I think reasonably well done. Let me see if I can turn my light on here. I think that this is a very well done sword, and the hamon in this light is going to stand out more. Outside I was having a little less cooperation with the weather. The sun wasn't shining, and that makes some of the aesthetic properties a little tough to spot. But I think that this Kasaki actually looks really, really nice. I'm very pleased with the polish. Is it a perfect, amazing art polish? No, but there's an identifiable Yokote on here. It's in the same spot on both sides. I don't know if it's necessarily burnishing, but the way it's polished, there's an aesthetic difference between the Kisaki, or the very tip, and the blade. The Hada, I don't know if you're going to be able to spot any of it in this camera, but maybe in a different. Looks nice. The hamon is pleasant. In this light, it might actually be easier to spot some areas where there is some potential lamination, but it's not something I'm comfortable with saying I definitely spot or not. Again, the flats of the blade in this light, maybe they show a little bit better. Very well done, very clean lines for a polish like this. Now, it's not perfect. Again, this is not something that I would say is, would be something I would expect for a polish that costs thousands of dollars, but for a sword at $1,500, I think this is kind of what I would expect from the polish, and I think it meets my expectations in that regard. Now, in terms of feeling, that is something I can show you. I did a little bit of handling on the sword, and frankly, it feels great. It feels very comfortable in my hand. Again, I didn't notice that my hand was catching on any of the little ledge that I feel down here, and it feels, for its size, very comfortable, very well balanced. That's a term that's really difficult for me to describe to you, so hopefully some of the video that I'm showing you gives you some idea of balance, and that is what I can offer you in terms of subjective feelings. But for a sword of its size at 28.5 inches and for 2 pounds and 7 ounces, it feels very nimble, very agile. It feels like I have control of the tip. It doesn't give me the impression that it is bad. I feel comfortable moving it around, and the shape and everything, there's no reason that I would not use this to cut just about any medium that a sword is supposed to cut. I wouldn't mind using it on tatame or on bamboo or harder targets. Again, it's not going to cut a tank in half, but for what you are supposed to cut with a sword, I think that it would work just fine. This is a very fine feeling sword. So first I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up, and then I'm going to go back and try something different because something interesting has popped up community-wise, and maybe it will be beneficial, though it's experimental. So do I think it's worth it? Well, at $1,500 is a lot of money, frankly. But I have to look at what is available at $1,500. So what this sword offers you is a folded, laminated blade. Again, there might be some question about if that's true. That's kind of a sword community questionnaire for a lot of different manufacturers. Not to say Skyjiro, again, has given any reason to doubt that. But assuming that this is a kobusei or a laminated style of blade with folded steel in a nice polish, with good fittings and a functional assembly out of the box, that's what you're getting for $1,500. If you like the aesthetic appeal and the size fits for you, all the well and better. What else can you get for $1,500 that's folded in the same? Well, there are things with similar features. So you have other swords from Skyjiro that might be in a different theme or something like that, or a different blade style. You have some pieces from Dynasty Forge. They're Daimyo series, but not the Tamahagane line, but the other kind of steel that they used is about $1,500. You have some pieces from Hanwei as well. They might be a little less or a little more than $1,500 depending, but in general, some of their higher end folded steels are available in those lines as well. The thing to note about the Hanwei and Dynasty Forge line is that I don't believe any of them are a laminated style of blade. They're folded steels, but they don't have a laminated construction where you're using a folded steel and perhaps a different folded steel assembled in such a way that you get different properties. There are other laminated blades from companies like Munotoshi that might be less expensive. There's laminated blades from a company like Ronin Katana. Their Elite series is a laminated style blade, but the Ronins are not generally, I don't believe, folded steel, so you don't quite get the same effect. Anyway, not a lot is necessarily even coming to mind in terms of what's available in a laminated and folded blade at $1,500. The only other one that I can really think of is the Taisuke Nihonto blades. They offer a Sanmai series blade, which is a laminated type of construction. It's different than Kobuse, but a similar amount of effort and work goes into it. Their blades are usually around, say, $2,000-ish in the entry-level laminated style blades. And if I compare them, well, it just so happens I have one. So here is a Taisuke Nihonto. Now, I've done a review on this in and of itself. The Taisuke Nihonto is $1,500. But if I compare and contrast them, you can see some differences already. So this sword is, at least, if you buy it from Taisuke, it's, I believe, $2,000-ish, somewhere in there. This is kind of off the cuff. This one is $1,700 from the manufacturer, but $1,500 online. So they're not quite a comparison, but they're actually probably about the most similar in terms of what's available on the market. This is a laminated and folded blade. This is a laminated and folded blade, and they're in generally the same price category. But I would say the Skyjiro does a better job on the mount and assembly. The transitions are cleaner and nicer on the Skyjiro. The overall look, just in terms of general, I think this one does a better job of not pulling my eye to any one location aesthetically. But in terms of just the nitty-gritty details, the Skyjiro hits the mark a lot closer. The Taisuke does have some genuine silver parts on it. I don't know that the Skyjiro does. I think they're plated. This is like a solid silver habaki and some other bits. And silver is an expensive metal, so you know it is worth noting that there are more precious metals perhaps on this one. But you know, is it $500? No, not really that much. If I compare the blades, though, let's see if I can do this without hurting myself. The Skyjiro to the Taisuke, they have very similar levels of general polish, but I would say that the Skyjiro actually does a better job. The Kasaki is more refined on the Skyjiro than on the Taisuke. Taisuke is a bohi. It's different, it's thicker. And frankly, I think the Taisuke actually feels a little better in my hand than the Skyjiro. But aesthetically, everything gets hit on the head quite a bit better with the Skyjiro. And the Taisuke, well, it might feel better if I close my eyes. As soon as I open them, there's a lot of stuff that I would say I would almost want this one remounted before I used it. As for this one, I'd feel comfortable using pretty much straight out of the gate. A lot of that has to do with the Ito. The Taisuke is a little bit loose, the Skyjiro is tight, and there's a little bit more ledges and kind of odd feeling shapes. The Skyjiro seems about right out of the box. So when I compare it to the other stuff that's currently available on the market in comparison, I think they hit the mark. But $1,500 is still a lot of money. And you're in the category where, I mean, you could conceivably buy an inexpensive bare blade, send it off and have it custom mounted. If you were going to do something like teaching Iaido or something like that, or doing a lot of drawing practice, that might be a better option for you. Otherwise, compared to the other stuff that's on the market, while it's expensive, I think there's not a ton of stuff that gives you the same options for the same amount of money or less, or gives you a better deal. So from that aspect, I think it's not a bad deal. Nothing about this seems shady or bad or really overpriced considering what else is available that gives you the same features. Anyway, that's my general take on it. However, if you don't find lamination to be valuable, or if you don't believe it is laminated, or the polish level doesn't really do a lot for you, or you know, the mounting and the attention to detail doesn't really matter, then I think you can probably find a sword for quite a bit less money that doesn't charge you for those types of features. There's some from Skyjiro. I've been happy with their less expensive swords. They have a very similar level of mounting. In fact, I would say that this sword is below some of the other swords that I've had from Skyjiro. Not by a substantial margin, but most of their swords seem to be mounted in a similar level of quality. So if the folding and the lamination don't really mean a lot to you, I think you could save some money. Anyway, in a nutshell, yeah, I think it's not a bad deal. I would try to look for one secondhand before I spent $1,500 on it, but that's just me. If you're looking for a new sword, I think it's not a bad deal. Anyway, that is what I have for you on the Is It Worth It front. I hope that's helpful. Now I'm going to try something just a little different with this sword because it's something I've been watching YouTube videos on today, and maybe it will be interesting. So let's check that out. But first I'm going to put these away so I don't hurt myself. So the next thing I'm going to try, and I honestly don't know if I'm going to even include this in the video, is there has been some chat about this particular thingamadoodle right here. So if you're not familiar with what I'm looking at, let me switch my screen so you actually can see what I'm talking about. So here is a, how to describe this. This is supposed to be like an agility chart. It's supposed to tell you how well a sword moves or doesn't move, and all of that type of malarkey. The thing is, it requires me getting some measurements from the sword that I really haven't gotten before, and that frankly, Thomas Riley of Medieval Review has basically made a video series about this. This is a weapon calculator made by, I know Peter Johnson has been involved in it, as well as another gentleman whose name, Vincent Le Chevalier. It's down at the bottom here. I want to give credit where credit's due. I'm sorry I'm massacring your name, sir. But this has the potential to be a really amazing tool to articulate to you how a sword feels. I show you video of me moving it around, but my body type and skill level may be different than yours, and by that I mean there's a good chance that I'm less skilled and fatter, or maybe not. I don't know. The point is that it's really difficult for me to articulate, one, how a sword feels in my hand, but two, since you are not me and don't feel the same way I do, it may very well feel completely different for you. So this is an opportunity where potentially I could have a very consistent mathematical and somewhat scientific approach to show you how a sword should feel, and it would be an easy way to compare and contrast all of the same swords. So to me, as a guy that does YouTube reviews, this is really exciting and potentially a way for me to fill in what I see as an enormous gap in the reviews that I do. I can tell you about if I think it's worth it. I can tell you how much money it is. I can tell you if I think aesthetically it's pretty or not, and I can show you some of the features and problems. And I think that reasonably those things are well. I think everyone can understand the idea of if it's pretty or not to them by looking at it. What I think is subjective. What you think is important, especially when you're spending your money on it. And if $1,500 is a lot of money to you, or a little, or it seems like a good value, or it doesn't, that's a question that you can answer for yourself. And if there's a problem, I can say, here's a problem, look at it, you can see it, it's somewhat tangible. I can show you what loose Ito kind of looks like. But I can't explain how a sword feels. And it's really tough for you to see how a sword feels just by me moving it around. So if this works, it's something that I'd like to include in future reviews, but I don't know, and so we're gonna see me experimenting with it. So here we go. I have no idea how this is going to work. I've seen some basic explanation. I've done a little bit of reading, but we're going to take the measurements as we go here. And yeah. So mass. I have to convert all of this stuff into the right stuff. I'm going to stop for now and resume in a moment. Alright, I think I have sorted out something. I don't know if this is correct, and this is my first time doing this, but frankly, it's awesome. I'm really digging it, but based on the graph that I have, I don't know what to think. I would suspect that longswords, I mean, basically it looks really good, and I don't know that it's supposed to, but I have zero things to compare it to. So let's just take a look. So here's what I've got. I did 4 reference points, which you can see here on the handle, and based on theoretical values, they seem to be roughly in there. The things that I am confident in, I know what the weight is. I do know how long the grip is. I do know how long the blade is. The center of gravity, I'm very confident in as well. The lever reference, to me, what I did is I measured the end of the kasha. That's usually where your pinky would go. I think that's right, but I'm not entirely sure if I'm using the lever reference correctly. Anyway, that's, basically that's the length of the kashira. The hilt node is also one that I am not 100% sure that I got right. So the hilt node, these are vibrational nodes in the blade. Now, I feel reasonably confident in this, and it looks to be in the area where, it's about where I'd expect, so I think I'm in the right ballpark. But it's really difficult, as you saw, to see the vibrational nodes in a katana. They're really rigid blades, so it's tough for me to see how they wiggle in comparison to, say, a longsword, which is a lot more flexible. The vibrational node in the handle, though, is really, really tough for me to spot. And so this is me thinking I have it right, but I don't honestly know if I have this right. The thing that I guess I'll note, though, is take a look at what happens when I adjust the hilt node. So if I move it up 5 centimeters to 27, right? So it's pretty much right on that point. You can see it doesn't change stuff around a lot. If I put it back to where I think it is, I think that's where I thought it was. Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't change the stuff around a lot. But if I go down to, say, down 5 centimeters, that would, and you can see that the change of the graph is not substantially altered. So this moves around a lot, but these aren't, the dynamics are not changing around substantially. So I don't know what to think about that. Now this one, by proxy, hypothetically I move it up, down, say, 10 centimeters. Right? Well, I mean, it didn't change around a lot. If I move it up 10 centimeters, I don't know why this is moving as well. I don't really get that. Hey, what's this doing? I don't get it. Okay. Why? Swing? I don't know what this thing is. Then. Node. Okay. Well, anyway, some stuff moves around, but I don't necessarily get it. So I did put in 4 leverage points. This I measured basically at the silver ring in the fuchi. Here I held it just above the kashira, kind of on the knot area. Here I held it on the lower minuki and the upper minuki. So those are kind of the reference points that I'm using. I tried to be as accurate as I could, but frankly, this looks very agile, and I don't know if it's supposed to. It's a very good feeling sword. But then again, I don't really know how to read this graph either. So, yeah. Anyway, this is food for thought. It's my first opportunity to use this chart, but I thought it would be something interesting. I'm reasonably confident in these values, and hopefully I get better at them over time. Anyway, that is all I have for you. I hope that you have found this interesting. If you like the use of the weapon computer and whatnot, if you have some suggestions for me, please let me know. This was a really exciting thing for me to do, and I look forward to doing it on a few more swords to compare and contrast. I'm going to put a link to the weapon dynamic computer for this sword because it lets me share a link to the measurements that I have, so you can dick about with it yourself a little bit. Anyway, that is all I have for you. As always, cheers, and thank you for watching.